Mystery Incorporated and their new friend Kiku. They were exploring the production facility for sweet scents for her perfume company. As the large cartoon Great Dane sniffed around the facility, trying desperately to find his friends, his large, sensitive nose was going haywire as his old factory system was bombarded with the cornucopia of the different fragrances that lingered in the air. Finally, Scooby Doo found himself in a large boardroom, hiding in the shadows at the end of a large conference table. Suddenly, he heard a creaking as the large oak door to the boardroom slowly opened. The boardroom had limited lighting because it was only illuminated by a couple of overhead security lights. Scooby strained his eyes to try and make out if someone was coming in the room. Suddenly, the large dog's back stiffened, and he felt his blood run cold. In the shadows, he was able to make out a scantily clad, voluptuous form, and almost instantly Scooby-Doo knew who it was, his old nemesis Sonya. He did his best to remain hidden in the shadows at the end of the large table, but his large body couldn't help but to begin to shake. Nervously, he watched as Sonya approached the other end of the conference table. She began to pick up different perfume scents and read their labels. The first small vial had a sweet, innocent title that she read out loud, Spring Morning. She picked up the next sample and giggled a little when she read its name, Drive Them Wild. She picked up the last small glass vial and strained her eyes a little as she read its label and sang Oh My when she was done. Their label read, The perfect scent for the world's fastest growing sexual fetish, Make him sneeze. Scooby-Doo could see her flash her evil smile as she sprayed a little bit of the perfume against the left side of her neck. She then lowered the tester to just above chest height, and then aiming it downward, she sprayed a healthy dose into her cleavage. Carefully, she fanned upwards with her left hand as she softly inhaled. She stood there for a second taking in the aroma before saying to herself, That's actually not bad. She sat down in one of the conference room chairs and turned it 180 degrees so that her back was now facing Scooby. She picked up her walkie-talkie and sent out a message to the other agents. This is Sonya. I just finished searching the top floor. No signs of any intruders. I'm taking 10, and then I'll rally with the rest of you in the parking structure subfloor B10. A bunch of female-sounding Rogers replied back over Sonya's walkie-talkie, and when they finished, Sonya herself replied, Roger over and out. She returned her walkie-talkie to her pack and breathed a sigh as she leaned back into the chair. She sat there for only a minute before sitting up straight again. She sat stiff in that position for a couple of seconds before her breath gasped and shuddered a couple of times before letting out a loud and unrestrained sneeze. She started to fan her chest rather quickly as she said to herself, Wow, that scent is stronger than I thought. This whole time Scooby-Doo continued to do his best to remain still as he hid at the opposite end of the table from where Sonya was sitting. As Sonya eased back into her chair, she continued to fan her cleavage with her left hand. The dark room remained rather quiet except for the rattling of Sonya's bracelets as she continued to fan her chest. Unbeknownst to Scooby-Doo and his highly sensitive super sleuth nose, the perfume tendrils floated and crept their way across the top of the conference room table in his general direction. As the large cartoon Great Dane continued to hide in the shadows, the far end of the table, his large nostrils suddenly picked up a new scent in the air. Without even thinking, his big black nose began to sniff as it investigated the new smell. His nose continued to sniff harder and harder while at the same time his nostrils flared open wider and wider each time he inhaled through his nose. Scooby-Doo wasn't sure what to make of the new smell until it was deep inside of his nose. Suddenly, the sweet, innocent scent felt like stiff, pointy feathers tickling and scratching at the walls and ceilings of his nasal passages. A cold, thin layer of sweat quickly covered the cartoon dog's body. His big, floppy ears quickly stood straight up as Scooby-Doo could feel his nose begin to tremble. His large, soft brown eyes began to fill up with sneezy tears that quickly overflowed and ran down his cheeks. Scooby-Doo's simple canine brain quickly came to a startling realization. He was going to sneeze. He quickly yet cautiously raised his right front paw so that he could place his pointer finger against the underside of his nose, but as he did so, he accidentally bumped it against the underside of the conference table that blocked the path between his finger and his poor helpless nose. The sound of his finger hitting the table wasn't very loud, but it was still enough to attract Sonya's attention for the moment. She called out, "Who is there?" and listened for a reply. Scooby Doo just sat there frozen in place, his right front paw hanging in space below the table. At the same time, the tickling inside his nose was only growing worse. Sweet beaded up on his forehead and began to drip down into his eyes. He could feel his nose filling up and overflowing with a clear, slimy discharge that oozed from his crater like nostrils and trickled its way down his jowls. Scooby-Doo's face began to drift into a pre-sneeze expression. He knew that he had to do something, and sensing that Sonya had relaxed back into her chair, Scooby lowered his until his nose came to rest on the top of the table. His nose flattened out on the table, and a wave of relief washed over the mighty canine. He let out a sigh of relief, while at the exact same time Sonya gave a simple single wave of her left hand across her breasts, and in doing so, she released another single perfume tendril. It slowly moved its way across the top of the table towards Scooby's large nose like a snake approaching its helpless prey. When it was a mere inch away from the dog's nose that rested on the table, it divided itself, creating the appearance of a forked tongue. It looked at Scooby's large nostrils as they sat on the table, giving the image of a couple of train tunnels. The perfume tendril then rushed into Scooby-Doo's nose, enhancing the intense tickle that was already inside of it. Scooby's eyes crossed as he looked down his long snout and could see his nose beginning to quiver and convulse with the impending sneeze. His nose was running so freely at this point that it had formed a puddle on top of the table that was oozing and dripping off of the side. Scooby-Doo couldn't take it anymore. His heart was pounding in his chest. Tears streamed like a river down his cheeks. He bit down hard as a last-ditch effort to hold back the inevitable sneeze, but quickly his lower jaw drooped back open. His eyes rolled up in his head before his eyelids closed tight, squeezing out his remaining tears. Finally, his nose could take no more, and a powerful sneeze erupted out all over the top of the conference room, table giving him away. Settings.